Susan Kaufman. I'm here for Attitude Magazine's weekly ADHD Experts webinar series. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are really pleased to welcome Stacy Nelson today to talk about the benefits of art therapy for children with ADHD and learning disabilities. Children have a natural propensity to communicate through art and through play, and art therapy takes advantage of that, uses drawing, painting, sculpting to help children develop interpersonal skills, manage behavior, and increase self-awareness. So Stacy Nelson's going to tell us a lot more about how art therapy actually helps a child address their personal challenges through both physical activity and sensory integration, about strategies that parents can use at home to make art with their children, and art projects that any parent can use. And she'll tell us about some of her children she's worked with who have benefited from art therapy sessions, and also address to some degree the extent to which school staff can encourage art in the classroom. And finally, she's going to talk a bit about how you can find a good art therapist. Stacy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Susan.
We appreciate your time. Let me introduce Stacy briefly to you, the listeners. She teaches in the Graduate Art Therapy program at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and she also provides art therapy to special needs students at a number of schools in the region, including the Kennedy Krieger School in Montgomery County and others. She's a member of the Maryland Art Therapy Association and received her MA in therapy from University of Louisville and her BA in studio art and psychology from Notre Dame of Maryland. So, Stacy, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a really fascinating topic. Before we get started, just let me describe for anyone who may not have attended an Attitude webinar how they work. You are muted. You can post your question for Stacy in the control panel on your screen at any time. And after her presentation, she'll respond to as many questions as we have time for. If you have any problems hearing us, please dial in via your phone line. You'll see that if you click phone call under audio in your control panel, the number will come up. This is an internet-based webinar, so problems in the line are due to internet bandwidth. You'll find a replay of this webinar at attitudemag.com/webinar. And within a week or so, a podcast version will be available. If you'd like to download Stacy's slides now, they're available in your control panel. Some people like to download them and follow along. And I guess that's it. There's also an archive of hundreds of other ADHD experts, Attitude ADHD Experts podcasts in the iTunes store that we urge you to take advantage of. It's a great resource. So with that, let me turn it over to you. Thank you, Stacy, for being here today.
Okay. Thank you for having me here today. I am delighted to talk about art therapy. My talk today is geared towards parents, teachers, and caregivers who want to be supportive of their children's creative endeavors. And when these children have issues related to attention and or learning problems, we want to engage these children in ways that both meet their needs and build on their strengths. So I have an outline. We'll just quickly go over that of what I'm going to share with you today. We're going to start with what art therapy is and how it works and what you might look for in hiring an art therapist, how art therapy can help a child with ADHD and LD with some specific skill development, and I'll finish with strategies and ideas for making art at home or school. Okay, so on this slide, you'll see a definition of art therapy from the American Art Therapy Association, the professional organization of art therapists in the U.S. Art therapy is the merging of talk therapy and art making to enhance the verbal expression with the nonverbal expression. Art therapy can be a natural fit for anyone, any age, no technical skills required, because the work is in the process of making art rather than having an attractive final project. So we as art therapists are attuned more to the efforts over the outcomes. And you'll hear me say this again later, that process can be much more important than the final art product. So remember, process over product. Art therapy can be a natural fit for children since art and play is their natural language over verbalizations. So children tend to be less self-conscious than adults when invited to make art. As they grow older, children tend to become more self-conscious, but art making can still be valuable for middle schoolers and even high schoolers as long as they have some motivation to create. Education of art therapists requires both knowing psychological theory and knowing art techniques and how to choose art materials for clients in a thoughtful way. Art therapists earn either their master's degrees or above. On this slide, you'll see what art therapist credentials look like. ATR reflects an art therapist who has met the training standards to become registered with the Art Therapy Credentialing Board, which is a national board. This credentialing board maintains the standards of professional competency and ethical practices for art therapists. ATR BC reflects the art therapist has also passed their board certification test. Some states require their art therapists to become licensed through a separate state licensing board. For example, since I live in Maryland, I'm licensed as a licensed clinical professional art therapist, which I know is a mouthful. So if you want to know more about art therapy or find an art therapist, I highly recommend the American Art Therapy Association website. The web address is there because they have a wealth of information, but also a Find a Therapist directory and links to state chapter websites, which can assist with finding an art therapist in your area. Art therapy is a specialization, so sometimes it can be tricky in finding one locally, and this website you see on the slide can be helpful with that. Okay. So on this slide, you can see some reasons why a referral to an art therapist may be appropriate if your child is having mental health problems and you're planning to seek out therapy for them. Some reasons can be your child expresses feelings, thoughts, and experiences more easily through visual images and art making. So it's just a comfortable way for them to express themselves. The child expresses an intense reaction during or making art. So you see evidence this experience of making art isn't just neutral for them, but profound. And for colleagues such as clinical social workers who are maybe already seeing a child for therapy, if the child is creating artwork that's disturbing to you or worrisome to the parents, or you have questions about how to respond to the child's artwork, then you as a fellow professional may want to seek out a referral or a consultation with an art therapist. And the last reason is the one that especially connects to our children with ADHD in that they would benefit from a therapy which is action-oriented and experience-based. So art therapy is good for people who need to keep their hands moving and just learn better by doing rather than just talking. And this can certainly be the case for our children with ADHD and LD. So art therapy came into existence in the 1940s, and for the first 50 years of art therapy's existence, we knew that it worked, but we didn't know how or why. In the last 20 years, advances in the neurosciences has helped us better understand the how and the why. If we think about how ADHD just doesn't live in one part of the brain, but all over the brain, art making can impacts all over the brain as well. Every time a person puts a brush to paper, they are engaging in problem solving and decision making, which are stimulating neural pathways and allows for integration of the different parts of the brain. Okay, so let's take a short look at the brain to identify what is happening when an individual is making art. And we're going to start from the bottom up at the most primitive part of the brain, the cerebellum. And art making that stimulates this part of the brain are sensory and kinesthetic experiences which have opportunities for touch, movement, visuals, and sound. Art making accessing the cerebellum can release tension and awaken the senses. So if you think about working with wet clay, it requires energy to manipulate and move the clay into shape. It is highly tactile. And initially working with clay requires squishing and pounding and using more gross motor skills and exploring the media. Okay, whoops. Then we move to the midbrain and the limbic system where emotional regulation takes place. When we think about accessing emotions and expressing affect, we can think about the experience of painting because paint is a fluid material which can be more difficult to control and is emotionally evocative and satisfying to manipulate with a paintbrush or even the hands. It requires some more fine motor skills and some ability to control oneself. Okay. And then we'll move on to the highest functioning part of the brain, the cerebrum. So this is where reasoning, executive functioning, and complex memory live. This part of the brain's expertise is in cognition and symbolism. And this part of the brain thrives with art materials which are easy to control, like drawing materials such as pencils or charcoals. The art making may be tasks which require some planning, like making a collage of magazine images. So ideally, we want all parts of the brains working together as well as possible in different ways during the creative process. Okay. All right, so let's take our briefest of summaries in brain science and put it to work to help our guys and girls with LD and ADHD. And here's an outline for some of the benefits. As a parent or teacher, you likely quickly recognize struggles in how your children approach schoolwork. And as an art therapist, I will notice the same attention difficulties in how a child approaches an art task. So the process of making art can reveal problems with focus, motor control, memory, managing emotions, organization, sequencing, and decision making. However, art making also has the potential to improve emotional well-being, develop problem-solving skills, and enhance social interaction. So in this slide, you can see some of the more specific ways that art making can help children practice skills needed to be more globally successful. And with this outline in mind, we're going to think about how we, as caring adults, use art making, which can be a creative, novel, and engaging task to help a child start by calming their bodies in order to focus. Okay. So we might start with warm-up activities, which can help the child get their energy out. Integrating movement can be helpful to get ready to focus on a task, especially for children who crave movement. Scribbling, painting with wide movements that use big arm muscles, having children stand while they're working or while they're pounding clay can help with this. Something as simple as having children move across a room to hang up their artwork on the wall can be helpful. Alternatively, having a child sit on the floor may physically ground them and can help a child focus when engaged in art making too. So there are several different options for trying out. To calm energy before working on an art task or even an academic subject, drawing in mandalas has been found to be helpful with focusing. If you are familiar with the coloring book trend, which has just seemed to have caught the nation by storm, you might have heard people talk about how coloring helps them feel calm, or that might be even something that you do. And the back and forth motion and rhythm of coloring is found to be calming. So the back and forth motion is bilaterally stimulating, i.e. engaging both sides of the body and the brain, and this helps the hemispheres of the brain work better together. So we're looking at mandalas on this slide, and mandalas is Sanskrit for circle. And mandala is simply just a circle drawn on a piece of paper, but the circle shapes, the circle shape within the rectangle provides structure, binds attention, and also creates a starting point, since just a blank piece of paper can be intimidating to some people. So you can make one easily by tracing a round flat object like a plate on a piece of paper. And here on the slide you see some examples of mandalas, and you can see there aren't any rules for drawing a mandala. You can even draw outside of the circle. This circle is just an excellent starting point. I also encourage children to use both their hands at the same time, so this again stimulates both sides of the brain. And I work with many young people with autism, and many of those individuals I work with prefer to use one hand, so I'll prompt them to use both hands, even if just one is holding the paper down instead of keeping it in their lap. Okay. Some art therapists use mandalas as warm-up activities. It's a great warm-up activity. Another warm-up activity I use is shorter, and it again engages using both sides of the body together. So the child picks a color to draw with, and then scribbles on one side of the paper for a few seconds, whatever they want. I just call it just warming up their body and brain, getting ready to do art. Then they turn the paper over and switch the marker to their non-dominant hand to make a second scribble. Okay. So after that, I might ask a child if they have a worry they carry with them and ask them to write, now back again with their dominant hand, the worry that they might want to put aside while they're making art. And I then instruct them to tear up the paper, and to tear up the paper, they have to use both hands together, thus engaging both sides of their body. Okay. So making art also requires attention sequencing. Some children with ADHD or LD may need help with this in art tasks. This can be done through writing down steps in order of completion. So say that a child will select something to make, select a material, a drawing or painting that they choose, and then adding a description or a title. Through the process, the child is using focused attention when responding to the stimulus by selecting to make something, then using working memory to sustain attention, using selective attention to ignore distractions, and using mental flexibility to problem solve any obstacles with the art making. And one thing that does happen in art making is things often don't come out exactly how one plans. So it's a great time to practice problem solving and frustration tolerance. Depending on the child, sequencing can be done ahead of time, for instance, by you, the adult, writing down the steps and then having the child check off after each step is complete. For instance, the steps of making a snowman that you see on the slide. For the child who's older or more independent in their art making, sequencing can also be used to reflect with a child on how they made something. So say, for instance, the child has decided to make this clay snowman, and they can explain back to you how they first rolled the different size balls, and then they stacked the balls, and then they explained the order in which they added each detail, and then they complete sequencing. So this brings us to the social aspect of art making and the opportunity for a young artist to explain what they made to a parent, teacher, or classmate. Making art as a class or family does provide natural opportunities for positive social interactions, like sharing materials, sharing space, making compliments, or even making suggestions as someone needs some help with some problem solving. Sometimes it's easier to talk about our artwork than ourselves. So I've included questions on this page to assist parents and teachers with talking about the artwork. As an art therapist, I'm generally more interested in the process, so I'm more likely to comment on positive behavior and how the artwork than how the artwork looks. So again, process over product. My husband thinks I should have that phrase put on a bumper sticker. You'll notice that these questions that I have up here focus more on shedding light on what the child's take on what they were doing, and then compliments come second. And that's something that parents and teachers can take away from this, and how to talk about artwork in what I like to call a casually curious manner about what the child's experience was, rather than the artwork is something pretty or decorative. So for example, a child might finish their artwork and I might ask them, start off, tell me about your picture, and can they put a feeling with it or as a title? And then I might say something like, gosh, I really was watching you work, and I saw how you followed the steps so carefully, and you were really focused, and even when things got frustrating, you still stuck with it. I just think that is awesome. So these are just different ways to engage in talking about the art. Okay, so now I'm going to show the artwork of two boys I'm working with, and their families generously gave permission to share their artwork for the education of others about art therapy, and these guys are art therapy rock stars. So one of the advantages of art therapy is that you can create a sense of pride and build self-esteem. And this young man, whose artwork is on the screen right now, is fairly new to art therapy. He's 14 years old, and he has learning difficulties. For example, learning to read was a huge achievement for this guy. He really worked hard over years to develop that skill. And he had been in talk therapy at school for a while, but wasn't really talking, so he switched into art therapy. And ironically, he now talks more about his worries more openly, which does help him school-wide. He struggles with academics, but he really shines in art therapy in terms of coming up with creative ideas. So here are two of his creations from found objects he just found in the art therapy room. The smaller figure is made of glue sticks, which I've had plenty of people use glue guns and glue sticks, but never to actually make an object. So he created something I had never dreamed about before and had the fine motor skills to make it without burning himself. He was extremely confident in making it, and the result is just utterly charming and inventive. And this is a guy whose family really supports his creativity. For example, his dad and him have a tradition of coming up with the coolest science fair projects together. Okay, and he also made this piece, which is a playboard that he made with the intention of giving to younger students to play with. And he also explained about its creation to his own class. So here is the social aspect again, giving him the artwork as a focus to talk about instead of the attention being solely on him, which for this guy who's a little shy works really well. Also, we're just starting to work the list of steps to get the artwork. So this guy is pretty independent with coming up with what he wants to do and how he envisions doing it on his own. And what we're starting to do is after he completes the artwork, reviewing what he did and writing it down for him so we still get into the sequencing and memory practice. The ultimate goal would be a book of instructions he can share with others. And this guy also has aspirations to be an inventor, so I just really want to support that in the sessions. Okay. So I'm going to show several pieces of artwork from the second student. I've been working with this young man for about 5 years, and you can see evidence of ADHD in his early artwork. This is from his first session, and he couldn't even finish either of these drawings, as you can see. He started art therapy when he was about 9. He's also 14. So if you can see the first session, and then I'm going to go to the next session, or excuse me, years later after plenty of work together. And this is another one of his creations. And this can really demonstrate the reason to keep or photograph children's artwork, because artwork can serve as a visual record for progress. And we can see in the student's artwork in terms of, this was his creation for a school-related art show. And it's a painting on canvas with stars and strips of paper glued onto it. And you can see his improvement in deliberation and in his creating. In fact, when he and I were reviewing which of his artwork I was going to use for his presentation, it provided an opportunity for us to reminisce together about the progress he had made. This is another piece this student is working on now. It's a piece made of wood, and he's working over several months on this, and he changes and adjusts his ideas. So the fact that he can work on the same project over months is a huge accomplishment. He's also getting ready to transition into high school and dealing with many changes which are out of his control. So this project is one of the things in his life he has complete control over. Plus, he's now working with a glue gun and wood, and I've noticed several things. First, if he seems heightened and unfocused, and is wanting to use a glue gun, it's a good time for me to sneak in some relaxation. So I would dim the lights, have him take some slow, deep breaths, do some mindfulness exercises, since he knows he needs to have his body calm and focused in order to safely use the glue gun. Using the glue gun is a privilege that has to be worked towards in art therapy with me because it's easy to burn oneself with it. So when kids demonstrate the ability to use it, we make a good big deal of it. Also, I noticed the back and forth motion he uses when sanding wood seems to be calming for him in the same way that coloring can be for others. So I'm just throwing that in case someone's child likes to build stuff. Okay. And again, this is the same student with something completely different. And it really shows how emotional content can be powerful, and yet art can be a safe way to express things that are emotionally charged. So here I asked him to draw a picture of anxiety, as this is something he struggles with. He drew himself and described how the anxiety felt in his body. And the red that you see around through the body and on the arms and on the head, that's what the anxiety is. And you can see some of the words he has at the top of the page that he described the feelings. So big and red and jagged and the highest level. I'd skipped over talking about how art therapy can help with managing emotions in order to share this artwork, because I think it is a great example of sometimes emotionally charged materials are just too difficult to talk about and describe with words. So making a drawing or painting about a feeling or a hard time can be a more comfortable way to express, or in this case, a starting off point to describe one's personal experience. As a parent, you might also ask your child what a particular feeling or experience looks like. They may draw it realistically or abstractly, but it can be a starting off point of them telling you their point of view. You can use the question listed in that previous question slide to begin, and then as the conversation goes deeper, you can also listen for opportunities that you can do a little cheerleading. For instance, if they draw and tell you about an experience of being angry at school, you can ask, as they're talking about it, ultimately you can ask, what was the worst part for them? And you can ask them what helped them get through that in order to highlight some skills or some resiliency that maybe they didn't notice in themselves at first. And it could provide an opportunity for you to provide some support. Okay. So now here's a pretty contained activity that addresses emotions. And it's short, it's 3 steps. You can have the child draw something that makes them feel angry or frustrated, whatever the negative emotion is. And then have them rip up the paper and use these pieces to create something that makes them feel happy. So really get into the drama of ripping the negative. Like you can have them make noises or really rip the paper into tiny pieces. Just get those negative feelings out. And then they don't have to use all the ripped paper, but use some of the ripped paper and other drawing materials to create something that makes them happy. So this can be a good exercise to talk about changing an attitude or focusing on the positive instead of just the negative. Okay, so I want to end with some ideas and strategies to create a pro-creative environment to help our young people with ADHD and LD be able to engage in the art process. First of all, to all you parents and teachers, having a positive and motivating attitude is the first ingredient. So it doesn't matter how the art looks. It doesn't matter if you yourself haven't picked up a marker since you were 12. As is in the case of most adults, just have fun with it. I have a degree in studio art, and when I sit with a child and draw alongside of them, I draw simply like a child, because it's not about what I make. It's about sitting with them and being present with the child. So again, we're talking about process over product. Other tips: clear the space, have as few visual distractions as possible, turn away and put away any electronics, organize materials and limit child to having only 2 or 3 options of materials or choices of a craft. Writing down the steps for checking off can be extremely helpful. And then if a child's working on paper, you might even create a visual boundary around the paper by marking off the edges with something like blue painter's tapes to help them focus on the paper. Okay. Another point, having friendly materials. So materials should be washable and easy to use. Materials should be in good condition. So for instance, markers should be in good working condition and not be almost dried up. Paper should not be crumpled. I like Crayola materials because I think they are durable. Other therapists have different preferences. I've also been using things like quick paint sticks, which are here on the slide, because they go on the paper smoothly and the marks look like paint and they blend nicely, but they also dry in 90 seconds. Middle schoolers and older teens would likely be more interested in more artist quality material, which is now pretty readily available in mainstream art supply stores. And there's no shortage of ideas in the world. So Pinterest is a great source I use for inspiration, but just keep your eye open for things that your child might be interested in doing. And then the last point is have fun. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work out. It's just an opportunity to try again. Remember, it's only paper, and art materials are meant to be used up and enjoyed. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with just 2 more art activities. One is how to make one's own coloring sheet. It only has 2 steps. So it's good when you're in a pinch and maybe you only have paper and a few markers or crayons to work with. This is also a good idea for in a classroom when there might be an unexpected longer wait time between activities and the teacher needs a few minutes for students to be quieter and more focused on themselves. So with a black or dark color marker, the child would just close their eyes and draw a scribble on a page. It can be as simple or as elaborate as they want. And then when they open their eyes, there's all these neat little sections to color in, and they can color in each section in a different color, and it can make a pretty design. Okay. This second art idea is a weaving idea that one of my recent students from George Washington University found on Pinterest and shared with our class. It has many more steps, but I share it with you just because I have found weaving of all types recently to be a common activity for students and honestly just for myself too. So, so there's what you do is create a loom, and then which the directions are all here, and then weave in and out around the yarn, and then what the different yarn can create a more elaborate pattern, and what is left is this little soft piece of weaving that this one is about the size of a coaster, drink coaster, and it can make a soft little fidget. So for individuals that like to have something to move in their hands to help them be calm, it can feel really nice and be small enough to be kept in the palm of one's hand. Okay, and so I just end with thanks to you all for listening and some words of wisdom from a student in our therapy session who explained to me why art therapy is important to him, and I think it describes how art therapy can be important for people with ADHD and LD, and he said it more succinctly than I ever could. When I do bigger projects and they get better, then all things are possible. Thank you.
That's a wonderful ending. I wanted to ask our listeners, would you please post why you're here, is it as a parent or as a teacher, and what your specific interest in art therapy is? If you could just post that for everyone, that would be helpful for us to know as we go into the question and answer period. So Stacy, this is a really inspirational presentation. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, in what context are you usually working, or do ADHD and LD kids work with an art therapist? Is it in the classroom? Is it a private therapy session? How do your patients, clients often come to you?
So I work primarily in a school, so that's the context I work in. However, many art therapists are in private practice, and ADHD, LD, anxiety are some of the common reasons why children might be brought into therapy by their parents. Okay.
Interesting. So in the school context, do you work with all the students, or you referred certain students who have special needs of some kind?
Yeah, so where I work, art therapy is an IEP-based services.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but I know of other art therapists who work in other places that are able to do more programmatic or classroom interventions or work collaboratively with teachers.
Okay.
This depends on a lot of the school district and specifics like that.
So it isn't necessarily part of art class per se, or it might.
Yeah, it's not necessarily part of art class. Art class is a lot different, and art therapy in our class might look really similar on the surface,
Hmm.
but our teachers are focused more on developing technique, and our therapists are not as interested in technique. We might give technical assistance, uh, but really the focus is on developing specific skills or helping with emotional regulation, helping children express their feelings in a nonverbal way.
Got it. Okay, that's great. Um, I'm looking at some of the questions here. It looks as if many of the people who are listening in are parents themselves and like very much the suggestions that you have for projects, and are looking oftentimes for projects to do over the summer.
Yeah.
Can you add to the wonderful examples you gave, or perhaps for other simple projects that parents might do at home?
Yeah, and I think the place to always start is what your child's more interested in. So I kind of like when I was talking about the brain pieces, and some people really like to do clay and moving things in their hands and getting squishy. So things I would recommend are looking up some homemade, easy home clay or dough recipes, which they tend to be online and pretty easy. I mean, my standby for years was always flour, salt, water mushed together, and then you could
Right.
always bake it in a toaster oven, and that was really fun. And then for kids that other kids that like to build things, there's a lot of cool wooden projects that sometimes are available, or just finding balsa wood, which can be bought in a pack, and putting it together in interesting ways. It could be, realistic, like building little mini houses, or just making some abstract designs and painting it or spray painting it can be really fun. Um, and but I think that the thing is to really just like start with wherever your child is interested. Like if they like to paint, okay, well let's get some. It's nice outside. Let's get some really big paper, or and just paint whatever we want and try different styles. A lot of times, kids love the Jackson Pollock style of flicking paint, and that can be just really fun. So those kinds of things are I'm thinking of for like outdoors
Hmm.
activities for the summer. Uh, but
Someone here mentioned squiggles and giggles. She said squiggles and giggles are wonderful line scribbles that are fantastic to start off many art sessions. Does that ring a bell to you?
so squiggles and giggles specifically doesn't ring a bell to me,
Right.
but I'm interested in finding out more. But I think, starting with scribbles is just great because we all naturally learn to scribble. Well, don't even have to learn. That's what when you put a crayon in a very young child's hand, that's what they do. So we've all started off there, and I think
Hmm.
it's a great starting off point for let's make a scribble and then see what we can see in the scribble. Can we, almost like looking at shapes in the clouds, and
Right.
then can we make those objects that we see into a story or into one big picture? And
Hmm.
it could be a nice jumping off point for some creative idea development.
Yeah. A couple of people are saying something specific that's interesting. Um, how can I get my child draw or express through drawing feelings like anger or anxiety? They seem to be here because of that concern, helping their children express their emotions. Any
Yeah.
thoughts for them, for those
Yeah.
folks?
Yeah. So I always think about thinking line shapes and colors. So if their child could even make a simple drawing, and they might need to support their children in terms of like, what color would angry be? And there's no right or wrong answer to that, but like, what color would it be? And then, like I did with the young man with the anxiety picture, that's how I started with him. What color do you want to use for your anxiety? What shape would it be? Would it be smooth or jagged? Would it be big or small? And just give some structure to start to think about it. Um, the child that you saw the artwork for drew a face. That's not uncommon, but it doesn't have to be that way. They could fill a box with abstract shapes. And it's good to do like several different pictures. The parent might be concerned about anger or anxiety or sadness, but do a few, like several different feelings. The basic feelings are sad, mad, scared, and happy. So if a parent has a child do each one of those 4 feelings, there's an opportunity for the child to describe each one of those feelings and maybe put them in order of where they feel least to most. And really can have a conversation about which do you feel generally most, or how do you feel today, and kind of just start a conversation about it.
That's interesting. Yeah, using art to have them articulate. Interesting. Just to chime in, Annette says that she's an artist in Canada and who volunteers at school where her son is in a school with other children with autism, and she's amazed by how she's able to calm children down by leading them to the art table. So she is interested in becoming an art therapist and wonders how long does it take to become qualified, and is it a difficult field to enter for someone who's interested in becoming an art therapist?
I think if that's your passion, to go with it. That's the first thing. If that's something there, and it's a small field, but I think it's growing. In just the fact that we're talking about it today is always a good sign that people are interested, want to learn more about it, and feel like it's valuable. So if it sounds like she is coming from a background of believing this is something that can be helpful, and then it does take the education, the master's degree, and then the hours of supervised work to become registered. But yeah, it's getting out there. It's getting bigger, in my opinion.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Another set of questions are about how does art therapy help executive functioning and or learning? I think you touched on that at some point when you talked about the stages of planning and developing an art project.
Yeah.
Do you want to say some more about that? About how art,
I may wonder if I just switched back to the the outline that I framed out. Excuse me for going backwards. Here we go. The benefits.
Yeah.
So anytime, any type of planning takes working through steps, and that can be hard to envision or think through abstractly. And the way that I think it's helpful in the art, first of all, that if a person is motivated to do art, they're already engaged in it in some way. Something's motivating, the wanting to put an idea to paper, or using a art material. So it's just getting them the practice in to breaking down something into steps can be helpful. And this can also be done in a lot of different ways. It could be done with a child who needs a great deal of help at the beginning, like having the adult put in the steps, or as they gain more confidence and skill in working through steps, creating the steps themselves. So it really is just, I think it's the part that helps with learning is the practical work, just doing it. And it can be done in a less threatening manner than maybe working through something that isn't as engaging. Like, for me, it would be math, but it's different for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Suzanne, who's listening in, offers something that I want to recommend to everyone. She says, shadow art is a great summer project. You take a piece of paper and sit under a tree and trace the cast shadow. I recently used this with my own daughter and another child who has anxiety. about meeting and interacting with other children. By pairing the girls together, I found that the other child relaxed and sat under the tree, and before long, both girls were just talking and enjoying the experience. So, is that a good example of using art therapy to develop social skills? Or do you ever do art therapy with a group of children or more than one child?
Yeah, and it is a great opportunity for developing social skills, and I really love her idea. It sounds very fun, and I really like the way that it sounds like she kind of let the other child watch first before getting into it themselves, because that can be another great learning thing. If children learn better from each other than from us sometimes. So if a child wants to watch or learn, someone do something first. And it also can be really inspiring. Kids can share really great creative ideas with each other of like how to do something. And it sounds like that's happened in this situation.
Yeah, it's a really nice idea. Well, I want to sit under a tree and draw shadows.
It's like a great summer activity.
Who wouldn't want to do that, right? Dr. Andy Black, who's on the line, asks, what do you think about making an art bag to go? What would you suggest to include?
Yeah, I think that is great. A lot of times you can put all sorts of different coping strategies in there, like favorite books or a marker and pads of paper. So I think the portability factor is a great thing to bring up, because parents are so on the go now. Families are so on the go now. And so it can be whatever the parent and child think together will work for them. But it can be something that's kept in a bag that can be, used in the car, or if a child's sitting at their siblings' basketball practice, so to keep them focused on themselves and relaxed and happy while something else is going on.
Yeah, great idea. Leanne says something interesting. She says, my child only likes to draw or color his or her preferred character, Super Mario. So how can I use that to get them to express themselves more? Should she try to move her child away from their preferred character, or work with a preferred character? Or what are your thoughts on that kind of situation?
Yeah, so my way to tend to do it tends to be working with the preferred characters. And Mario can go on an adventure. Mario could go on the bus or to the child's school or whatever needs to be. Mario can talk, can expand Mario. And then once that's going well, and this is my way of doing it, is start to incorporate other characters.
Interesting.
And just start to have Mario and a friend. And it could be Luigi, or it could be a friend that's creative, or another character, a Disney character, whatever way that seems to be a good buddy to Mario. But I think starting for where the child is, if they're interested in Mario, great. It sounds like he probably has a lot of skill in drawing Mario and likes to draw Mario, feels good about drawing. Right. And then, then it's like, that's awesome. Let's start to gradually incorporate something else.
Okay, right. That makes sense. Let's see. Oh, this is always a good question. Can you refer the listeners to any other resources or good books on art therapy?
Yeah, so let's see. So there's one art therapist, I think there's the Art Therapy Source Book and other books by an art therapist named Kathy Malchiotti, which I think are really nice for non-art therapists, because she writes in a really engaging way that you don't have to have your master's degree in art therapy to really get some good ideas and a sense of how to start incorporating.
Could you say her name again?
Kathy Malchiotti.
How do you spell that?
Oh,
M-A.
Yeah.
We'll look at it. We'll look it up.
Well,
Back to
thank
you.
you. Thank you, Attitudes Magazine, for helping me.
Right.
Yeah.
So she has suggested art projects, it sounds like.
I don't think she has suggested art projects, but I think she's a good starting off point. And then let's see, I'm trying to think of what else I use as suggested art projects, because sometimes I just collect them over time and from other professionals. And that's why I like teaching, because I get ideas from art therapy graduate students. But I do, sometimes I'll just Google or Pinterest like crafts for children, preschool children or middle schoolers, and just start looking at things and think, oh, that would be good for so-and-so. Let me think about how I can wrap art therapy around it. So I really just encourage people to keep their eyes open for what their kids like, and then just Google.
Okay, that sounds great. And I'm sure you're right about Pinterest. Pinterest probably has incredible.
Yeah, I'm a recent convert to Pinterest,
yeah.
but I do find lots of good ideas just to get my brain started.
Right.
Working with something, or if I want to do something with building or clay, I'll do that. Oh, I see you have Kathy Malchiotti's name up there. So
two people kindly posted the correct spelling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Malchiodi, and it sounds like she might be the author of the Art Therapy Source Book. Does that sound right as a resource?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to post that too. Great. I love these kinds of resources that really help people, go forward. Okay. Art Therapy Source Book. Great. You mentioned an IEP. Can you talk a little bit about that? How would a parent get art therapy entered into their child's IEP? That would seem like a great way to make sure their child gets the benefits of art therapy.
Yeah. So art therapy isn't available in all schools or all counties, which is too bad. But when it is, it's I think the first step is just bringing it to a teacher or guidance counselor's attention that that's something you're interested in, and maybe giving some of the reasons that I described today in this talk about how you might see them using it at home, or it seems like they're calmer after they do some art. Is that something that could be incorporated into? Is that available? So I think the first thing is starting a discussion about it and seeing if it is something that can be put in, and how open the school might be into looking into.
Okay, sounds great. There are a number of questions about age range. Some people would like to know about art projects for kids who are 4 or 5, and other people wonder about high schoolers or teenagers. Can you talk about the range of ages for which art therapy is appropriate?
Yeah.
And how the projects vary?
And have what? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
And how the projects might vary by age?
Yeah, so the projects for the little kids, the 3, 4, 5-year-olds, they're going to be short. So they're going to be the ones that have maybe up to 3 steps. So it might be, color, cut, and glue. And so they're going to be pretty simple. As kids get older, can be more independent with materials and follow more steps and add more details. So I think for the little kids is really just keeping it simple and really success oriented, and know that you're going to go through a lot of materials. Something that's even good for them are those little birdhouses or things that kids can paint or decorate, I think those are successful all over time, and it's kind of a nice time of year of doing it. But
Right.
if you paint a wooden birdhouse, no matter how it's painted, it's still going to be a wooden birdhouse. It's still going to look like a wooden birdhouse. So it's super successful, any age, any skill level, and you know, mainstream art supply stores have them by the dozens of different types of things for that. And then as you get older into elementary school, kids are going to be drawing more about their world, their school, their home, and as they get older, their friends. And friends become even more important. And so they are more interested in doing things with those subject matters, and also just maybe some cool novel things like using tissue paper to make tissue paper collages, and that's pretty easy. You get tissue paper and you can make a mixture of glue and water and paint on top of the tissue paper, and it makes these really of all different shapes and sizes of cut up tissue paper, ripped up tissue paper, and they can make some really interesting things, and kids can do more abstract designs. And then when you get more into middle school, high school, those are the kids that are going to stick with art are the ones that are interested in it. So after about age 12, art classes isn't part of grammar school general ed anymore. Mm-hmm. It's more of an option, an elective. So the kids that are still doing art at this point have some extra motivation, and probably get some self-esteem from having some art skills. And so those are the times that it's really a great time to start to introduce to the higher quality art materials, like the charcoals or the pastels or the oil paint. And those can be really inviting because kids are matching their, they're developing their skill, and that can be incredibly reinforcing. So that's kind of the gamut in a very brief summary.
Range. Yeah, absolutely. So expose children, work with young children, and then see as they get older where their interests lie and where they might be most responsive. Interesting question here on the relationship of art therapy to sensory integration disorder. And I also want to say that Carol Kranowitz is listening in, the guru of sensory integration. Hey, Carol. And she says, well done, Stacy. She's enjoying hearing you. So any comments on sensory integration and art therapy?
Yeah,
I know I have a daughter with sensory integration problems, and she finds the textures of certain art supplies very difficult.
Yes. Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay to it gives some choice, and working with art can give some control over experiencing some new textures. So a lot of times, really wet clay for example, really wet clay can be a off-putting material for a kid that doesn't like that. And you can do it little by little. I mean, if a child is motivated to make something, it's a good time to have a dialogue about what would they start to be comfortable with. Like, will they use it with gloves? Will they touch it will they just poke it with their finger, and then can they dictate what somebody else is doing to make it into their design? Will they just try it for a couple minutes and then they can take a break? So just starting to get more comfortable with it. Sometimes kids with the smell can be really difficult. So so they don't like this. Can we find something else that they do like the smell of better? Or just giving options and trying to work through it in a pretty gentle, laid-back manner. It's like, we're just going to try, and if it doesn't work, it's okay.
Moving on.
We're just going to try, and then we'll try, and just kind of make it in incremental steps.
Okay. Sounds great. Great question here. How can you suggest some strategies to improve self-image using art therapy? I think you touched on that with your closing quote from the person who said, when I improve my art, I see that everything is possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one thing to do is to notice the successes
Mm-hmm.
as the adult, being like, and some of the things that I talked about really paying attention to the process, paying attention to how somebody will work harder on something, like work through a problem or a frustration, and just noticing that and highlighting it. It can be really powerful as far as building self-esteem and doing it in a really authentic, specific way.
Right.
Not just like, oh, that's so pretty, you did better than me, but saying, gosh, I really noticed how you spent a lot of time choosing this blue and really making sure it went with all the other colors and really worked hard to paint the details specifically how you were thinking they needed to be, and
Right.
and notice those things can be incredibly powerful.
Okay, sounds great. Well, Stacy, we are coming to the end of our time, and I really want to thank you. It sounds like you're doing wonderful work with children. I think this was really inspirational, certainly for me, and I'm guessing for all of our listeners as well. To our listeners, I want to tell you about our upcoming webinars next Tuesday, June 6th. This is going to be a popular webinar with Randy Coleman on summer screen times and how to use apps and games to build social skills, creativity, and fitness during the summer. Wednesday, June 14th, language processing deficits and children with ADHD might be of interest, also at 1 p.m. And then Wednesday, June 28th for adults, weight loss guide for adults with ADHD. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew about those, and to thank all of you for listening in, and you especially, Stacy, for all your interesting ideas.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time. Thanks, everybody. This audio and Stacy's slides will be up on attitudemag.com/webinar within a short amount of time. And as I said before, you'll find the audio in our podcast library on iTunes, Attitude ADHD Experts, if you want to listen again or refer someone else to listen to this. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.